Welcome to another episode of the Tech and Real Estate Podcast. Today we have a special guest, Rex Shippey. Rex is not only a creative finance investor, but he also has his own YouTube channel, and he provides an honest, hands-on approach to real estate investing. Today, we'll dive into Rex's journey, explore his investment strategies, and get a glimpse of his unique approach to real estate. Let's get started. Hey, Rex, welcome to the show. Happy to have you here.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm super excited to be here.
Yeah, I was really excited a couple of weeks ago when I was searching Sub2 and looking at who's been doing deals, going through their deal flow. And you have this amazing content that you share on some of the creative deals that you've worked on. I know we'll touch on that at a later point, but first, we'd love to hear a little bit about your background and what got you into real estate.
Yeah, so that goes back a ways. Was the turning point was I read a book, Rich Dad Poor Dad book. Some friends of mine was pushing me to read this book, and me being in the mindset where I was, I thought, okay, I'll go ahead and read it, but I'm not going to buy it. I'm going to go on YouTube and find a free version and do it that way. So I listened to that book on YouTube, and there was a lot more later on that actually got me into it, but that was the start of it.
That's great. Yeah, a lot of folks, they say that book is like one of the first things they read. And even though it's not real estate specific, it just opens the mind of like passive income, other streams. So at this stage, you read this book, now you're thinking, like maybe I can have different strategies of acquiring wealth. So what exactly points you towards real estate? Is it now like looking at other communities or YouTube channels?
I started off looking at like the stock market because I didn't know anything about investing. So I looked at stock market, day trading. I didn't know anything about any of those. I didn't know anything about real estate either. But I realized that I want something that I can physically touch. You know, and as I was working, I had my own business. I'm working in a smaller town, and I see other people out there fixing houses up. I work for these other real estate investors, or what used to. So it made me realize, you know what? I could fix up that house there, and I could sell that house, or I could own that house over there. It made me realize real estate is a way that I could put my footprint on the community. And it's something that tangible, something that I can see, a legacy that I can leave for my family that can also see a footprint on the community.
Excellent. Yeah, I agree with that. When you have that light bulb switch of realizing like maybe you're helping in a particular service for real estate, but then you think like, I could maybe be owning these properties too. And like you said, not just for profit and to get rich, but more so to benefit the community and build generational wealth for the long term.
I don't know that there was necessarily a light bulb switch there, but it was just, my interest started flowing towards real estate as I was trying to buy these old properties that needed fixed up. Didn't end up buying any for a long time, but as I was pushing and trying to start that, my interest just grew and grew and grew as I was reaching out to neighbors and trying to figure out who owned this property and trying to get a hold of the homeowner, and just my interest in the real estate just grew. And I developed a love for real estate and the real estate business.
Got it. When most people want to dive into real estate, they think first, like, can I become a real estate agent? And that's how I'm going to get access to the data. It's how I'm going to talk to owners. It seems like you were directly talking to homeowners without, needing a license and just being someone that's open to communication. So could you walk through your process of like how you decided where your footprint would be in real estate and why you chose investor?
Things have pivoted. I started out, I was trying to buy some houses that needed fixed up. Yeah, I just went, there was an old house that had burnt down, and I drove by it every single day. And I decided, you know what? I'm going to try to go find the owner of that house. So I talk to the neighbors around there, and I had a business in a small town there where I knew a lot of knew a lot of people there in that town through my business. I'd worked for them. I had a tree service business. So I did work for them. So I started talking to neighbors. You know who owns this house? You know who owns this house? You know who owns this house? And they would say, I don't, but maybe go talk to this person. Go talk to this person. So it was that's where I was going to go and start fixing up houses, buy them, fix them up, resell them. But it pivoted, I that's just the kind of the cool thing is, you can still be in real estate, but there's so many different avenues, and you can start on one and then you can pivot and go to something different and have a total different journey, but still be in real estate. As I wasn't an agent. I thought about getting a license to be an agent, but I didn't see the need to. For me to own real estate and buy real estate, I didn't feel like I needed to be a licensed agent to make the difference, to make that happen.
Yeah, it's one of the misconceptions that people may have is that that's the only route. So it's great that you already had a footprint in the community, which tree service is huge. That's one of the things that a lot of investors actually forget about when they first purchase a property is like, oh man, if the tree's like over the roof, that's going to make my insurance go up. I need to get that cut. It could be expensive. But aside from falling to that tangent, you now at this stage, you first wanted to go into fix and flip locally, which is great because you understand the area as well as the pros and cons. Then you decide to make a switch at some point and you go towards creative finance. Now, can you describe a little bit of what was the switch and what even is creative finance?
My background, I have never had a bank loan even to this day, not even on a vehicle, not on anything. So up to that point, I had zero credit. I didn't even have a credit card. I had, I bought and sold businesses. So my tax return stuff was a disaster, with new businesses and starting a new business. So I've been through multiple small businesses. So there was no way that I could ever get qualified for a bank loan to buy a property. I grew up, I bought so much stuff creatively growing up. I bought vehicles. I bought equipment. We had a ranch. I bought a whole 100 head of sheep, creative finance. I bought our own ranch, creative finance. But I never took it into the investing side. I never made that connection because I'm like, no one will sell an investment property creatively. Why would they do that? That was the mindset I had. So once I knew early on, I knew I didn't want to be someone who just fixed and flipped houses. I wanted to hold properties. That's the reason I was getting into real estate, was to hold properties. I knew I didn't want to wholesale. I knew I didn't want to do that stuff, but I thought, you know what? This is the start. Everybody says to get started in real estate, start wholesaling, start fix and flipping, that type of stuff. But I didn't know how. I'm like, I know this is what I want to do, but how am I going to finance the properties? If I go to buy a property and hold a property, I can't go get a bank loan, even though that's what everybody told me. If you want to buy real estate, go down and get a bank loan, go buy a single family home, live in it for a year, rent it out, go buy another single family home. And I went on for probably at least 12 months, if not more, listening to these podcasts, listening to these people. That's what they're telling me. It was discouraging in a sense, but I'm like, I don't know of another way, even though I've done it. But I didn't know of another way, so I just kept pursuing that. I'm like, all right, I guess I got to get a credit card. And then we got to move to the next step. We got to start saving up 25% down payment. And you know the steps. And one of my brothers said, hey, I just ran across this guy on YouTube and he's doing like super cool things. Like, I think this would be really helpful for you. And so he finally sent me the video and I sat down and watched it. And it was a 16-hour YouTube video and of Pace Morby and just breaking down all the stuff. And I sat down and I listened to that video the whole way through. And I got up and I told my wife, I said, this is the way we are going to buy real estate. This is the way we are going to create financial freedom. And that was the turning point and the start of us actually buying real estate.
Wow. So throughout your life, you never had a credit card or was getting loans from the bank, and you were still able to acquire certain things that you needed at times. But yet, that mental barrier of understanding that it could be done through houses was one of the forces that was stopping you from actually recognizing that you could do it there, which is a great point because a lot of newbies, especially that I see, they go into real estate and they think it's one single linear path. Like step A leads to step B, leads to step C. But you mentioned that there's a ton that could be done in real estate, a lot of different paths can change. And that's excellent that you opened your mind. And when you received that YouTube video, you allowed it to like basically transform how you were able to look at a deal. And so now at this stage, you're just excited to now jump into creative finance, right?
Yeah, I realized I can do this. I don't have to have credit. I don't have to have any of that stuff. But I can actually go buy real estate. It just, that wall that was right in front of me, that is all I could see, was that brick wall for so long that I have to get a bank loan. I have to have good credit, all of that stuff. That wall crumbled when I watched that video, and it wasn't that far into the video, and that wall just totally crumbled, and I could see the future, and I could see this is my path to the financial freedom that I was dreaming for years, or a year prior, or whatever, and it totally broke that down. All the mental barriers, it just broke them down.
So now that you are on this path, you want to start your future being able to acquire deals without the barriers of traditional financing. What are your next steps to now try to acquire deals on creative finance? Are you still looking locally? And if so, how are you now starting to find these deals?
Yeah, so just, when I realized like there's so many more options out here, I just started making phone calls. I was calling anybody and everybody. Any house that I seen for sale that I thought might could be something, I was calling them. And I didn't have any direction. I was taking action, but I didn't have the direction. So I was just making all these calls, which was getting me practice, but I was trying to drive in 10 lanes at the same time, and I wasn't getting very far. I was doing it local, and then I started doing it out of state because I'm like, hey, this market, the Midwest, is going to be easier to buy something in. There's cheaper properties and probably less competition, and all the mindset stuff, that plays into that. I joined the community, the sub 2 community, because I'm like, I need a community of people. I need community here. But I was everywhere. And then that was the 1st of January when I joined. And then probably about a month in, I just took a step back from everything real estate related. I just worked on mindset and didn't even look at real estate stuff. Didn't really even do any of the real estate stuff. Just worked on mindset for months. And then from the early on, all the conversations I was having early on, one of them ended up coming back around, and the guy's like, hey, Rex, I'm going to buy this deal from a wholesaler, but I decided not to. Do you want this deal? Seller finance, $9,000 to the seller. And I'm like, yeah, I'll buy that deal. So that was the first investment deal, but it came from the conversations I was having early on before I had any direction or any of that stuff.
Yeah, that's so significant, right? You were on this path on your own, which tremendous job, but you saw that you were going many different pathways. There was no like maybe guardrails to kind of set you down a path. So while you were there, you would start to build a network with folks who were trying to accomplish the same goals as you to help you get to those goals faster. But then you realize I might need to take a step back and just get myself focused. before I go all in once again? And let's actually talk about mindset a little bit more. So, what was the mindset you were trying to get yourself at? Was it to try to block out all the other tasks that you were doing and become more focused?
To be honest, I think it was a little bit of discouragement because as a person, I thought, oh, I'm going to have 10 properties in the first 3 months or the first month, even though within the first month of realizing that to realizing all the creative finance options, I had people agreeing to do creative financing, but they wanted too much down or they wanted all these different things. But I could have bought 3 properties, but they just wasn't quite fit for what I was wanting. But it was probably a little bit of discouragement. Just my business, my tree service business was starting up. So I was starting to get really busy in the springtime. And I just didn't have time for everything at that moment. So as I was working, I would sit there and listen to mindset podcasts, stuff like that. But it's just, I didn't know what was broken my mindset. I'd listen to read books, but I didn't know what was broken in my mindset. I just knew, okay, the real estate isn't happening right this second. It's going to take time. I'm going to listen to the mindset stuff. And just because the more I listened to the mindset stuff, the more I wanted to listen to the mindset, and the more I wanted to work on mindset. So probably 2 different things. My work was starting up, so I was getting really busy, but then I was also a little bit discouraged as well. Not necessarily discouraged to the point of quitting, but just discouraged to the point of like, all right, I knew there was other things that I needed to work on before I actually started buying stuff.
I appreciate that level of honesty, right? Because sometimes we hear of just the successes and how someone's able to get from point A to point B really fast. But there's all those layers in between, which could be self doubt, discouragement. And I appreciate that you were able to kind of notice that from within and realize, you know what, I'm getting these deals to somehow work. They're not fitting my buy box. It's making me feel a little bit down about it. I'm just going to take a step back for now. But then, because you set up this network already, you land your first deal. And I could imagine at that point, you go from discouragement to being elated, to being super excited. So, could you walk through a bit more context of that deal?
Yeah. So it was just a little house that needed fixed up. I ended up partnering on it with one of my brothers because he's the one that convinced me to read this Rich Dad Poor Dad book, which totally changed my life. And he's also the one that sent me the video of Pace Morby that totally changed my life yet again. So I ended up bringing him on as a 50-50 partner on it. We bought it together. It needed a lot of work. Property was an amazing learning experience. We held that property for over 12 months before we ever made a dime off of it. We put probably $50,000 into that property. We had trouble with the contractors. We made mistakes. Contractors left with $10,000 or more, and just all the mistakes that went into it. They drug the project out 6 months longer than they was supposed to. But as a new person, I was just learning all of this stuff. And yeah, so that property, it was amazing to get it because I'm like, I did it. All the doubters, all the haters that said, you'll never make that happen. I'm like, I did it. I got this property. And, I bought a property and I know there was people that were surprised that they're like, he actually did it, you know? And so it was cool to actually have a property and have that confidence of like, I just bought a property. I own this little house that's in town. Yes, it's a town that's 2 hours away from me, but it's a town there, and I own this house in it. I own this. Like, that was a pretty cool feeling to be able to have that. But I was still not really super focused on the real estate. I was still focused on my business and fixing up this property at the same time because I was trying to do some of the work myself, and it's 2 hours away, and the weekends and all of that stuff. But it wasn't it didn't go smooth, you know. and nothing does. I knew nothing about real estate. There was an agent involved in this one that was dealing with the wholesaler and me. And there was an agent facilitating the paperwork and stuff. And after we agreed to buy it, I asked the agent a couple of days later, I said, "Hey, when are we going to sign contract?" And guess what she said? "You already did sign contract." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." I didn't even know what I didn't know what I didn't even know what I was doing. I didn't know that I signed a contract on a property. And I'd already signed contract on a property. So that's how little I knew about real estate. I was just getting in there doing things, and I was making the mistakes, and then I would have to learn from them and then make another one. But that property was really just, it gave me even more confidence, I guess. Like people talk about like I just want that proof of concept. And to a point it did, but it's still the old mindset's still there. They're like, "Yeah, you got lucky on this." When you got that little thing in your brain that's like, "Oh yeah, Rex, you got lucky on this one. Someone that would just happen by chance. You're not going to get another one. There's no way. There's no way you can buy something subject to. This property's a 1940s house and it needs a lot of work. You might only get properties like this." There's that little thing in your mind that starts telling you that stuff over and over and over. But it's just, so that one was a huge step, but there's still like all the mindset stuff that's still telling you that you're not going to be able to succeed. You're not going to be able to go farther still.
Right. Well, I just want to first commend you so much for getting that first property and for tapping yourself on the shoulder for it on the back, because a lot of folks never make it to one. And some folks that do, they are so consumed about what they read about. And if they think in their heads, if I'm not at 10, 50, 100, it's not a success. But in fact, it is. I can have a lot of parallels to you from my story, where I didn't know anyone who was an investor. I didn't have any family members who owned properties that tried to make this happen. I've known of like accidental landlords that had to move, that were like family friends. So when it became to that like part of getting my first deal, that was a real excitement too. So I think for you to recognize that and to commit to it, kudos to you. And I want to dive a little bit deeper there. What were some of those learning lessons? So you mentioned that, those 12 months were pretty rough in trying to get the property ready. As well, you were kind of shifting back and forth 2 hours to this property to do some of the work. But what were you able to take from that property for lessons that you were able to apply to future ones?
So I am not a person, I don't like managing contractors. So I'll bring on a partner that's good at managing contractors and enjoys that stuff. So that's one of the things. I'll never pay a contractor 50% up front, and when I'm doing an agreement with a contractor, it's going to be very detailed and a very detailed signed agreement. That way they are held to a standard. They are held to a timeline, and I can hold them to that. But I don't really like manage, if it's small project, I'll manage the contractors. But if it's big ones, I just bring on a partner that does it. It's the thing of, not having your paperwork correct, even though you got an agreement, but it's like, this agreement's not going to really hold up anywhere. So that was a huge learning thing. Don't get discouraged if it takes longer. We bought the property and we figured in 2 months, we would have it totally renovated and rented. But guess what? 2 months went by and it wasn't. And then another 2 and another 2 and another 2. So it was just, we was out of pocket for 12 months, not just in renovations, but the carry-in cost as well. So it took money to keep that property, but don't get discouraged if it takes longer, because it will take longer than you think. Every renovation you do is going to take longer than you think, and it's going to cost more money than you think.
Definitely costs more money than you think. I feel like this is always a trend when it comes to, especially your first time ever fixing up a property. So let's actually dive into that property a bit more. Like, what were you actually fixing? Was this something that was, burnt to the crisp or foundation issues? What were some of the major renovations that were done?
So on the house itself, so we bought the property and there was an old shed in the backyard that was about to fall over. We're like, okay, we're going to tear the shed down. We're going to cut out the big tree that's in the backyard. The house needed new floor covering, new paint, new kitchen is basically what the inside of the house needed. So not a ton. It was a small house and the outside was great, great roof, everything like that. So we bought it and we realized the shed that was in the backyard that was about to fall over was actually an additional dwelling unit. It had a foundation, it had sewer, it had power, it had water, it had everything there. So we ended up deciding to rebuild that, totally renovate it from ground up. So that ended up costing an extra $25,000, and that delayed the project farther, but it was already there, So that property there, just that extra unit will add an extra $600 to $800 a month in cash flow to the house. So that's really what needed done on it was floor covering, paint, new kitchen, and as far as the house itself. But then that other unit ended up being a whole rebuild, basically.
Wow. Yeah, it's an excellent discovery, right?
it, it was a great discovery, it would have cash flowed with just the house, but for an extra $25,000 or whatever it was that we put into that other unit, that's an extra $600-800 a month cash flow. That's just pure cash flow, So that's great return on our investment to add that extra $25,000 and rebuild that unit.
100%. And I'm really excited to get into the numbers of how everything worked out. And at the end of the day, like how you're able to get tenants as well, what your cash flow looks like. But that will be in part 2 when we do a live stream. And viewers, you can come into the live stream, ask questions to Rex that you may have. He'll be breaking down this deal. So before we get to more information on that, Rex, how could people reach out to you and follow your journey as you continue?
So Instagram or Facebook, but at Instagram, it's the Rex Shippy. Facebook is just Rex Shippy. YouTube channel, the Rex Shippy. So social media, I'm always posting some sort of content on there. And if you want to reach out to me on there, send me a message. I'll reply back to you. So yeah, that's the best way to reach me.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Rex. Super excited for our next call talking about mindset, the deal breakdown, and any other questions that may come. Really appreciate your time. Thanks so much.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.